Good day. Thank you for turning into this general election candidate forum for Legislative District 22, Position 1. The forum is presented by the Thurston County League of Women Voters and TCTV. The League is a nonprofit, nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in their government. The League is open to anyone of voting age. I'm Clydia Cuykendall from the League, and I'll be moderating this forum. The candidates for District 22 are Chris Reykdal and Jason Hearn. The candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then I'll ask questions of the candidates in alternating order. They will have 2 minutes for a response to each question, followed by 1 minute from the other candidate. There will be 2 minutes for closing statements at the end. Jason, please let us have your opening statement.
Bet. I'm Jason Hearn. I'm a Lacey City Council member, serving for my third year on Lacey City Council. I chair the Transportation Committee. I'm also serving on the Emergency Medical Services Board, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, Joint Animal Services, and I'm on Finance and Economic Development here for Lacey. I lived in this area since 1995 and want to take some of the exciting things that are happening in Lacey, including our economic development, our strong form of government, our fiscal policy, and our sound environmental responsibility that we've demonstrated to the state level, and look forward to continuing this race to be part of the solutions here in the 22nd District.
Chris Reykdal, we'd now like to hear from you.
Thank you. First of all, a big thank you to the League. It's a pretty remarkable organization. I appreciate having the opportunity to come back. You all are involved in some very innovative things, including some local government reform that I hope, if not in this forum, maybe in the future we can talk about, because you guys are going to make some strong recommendations about some things we're doing here in our community, so I appreciate that. Again, I'm Chris Reykdal. I'm a candidate for the State House of Representatives in District 22 here in our community. I live in Tumwater with my wife and my 2 kids, Carter and Kennedy. I'm a Tumwater School Board member, former staffer with the Senate Transportation Committee. I started my professional career as a school teacher, history teacher. I also work currently as a community and technical college leader for the state system that oversees our state's 34 community and technical colleges. Education is really in my blood. It's what I'm passionate about. It happens to be what I believe is really the root of economic success in Washington. We have a remarkable number of our adult population that has a high school diploma or less. These are the sorts of things that state government can have a very positive impact on. Much of what we care about in Washington is candidly at risk with respect to the budget crisis and what we've seen at the global and national level that's having an impact now here in our state. Getting our budget right, reforming our tax codes so that we have stable resources in state government, making difficult choices about the priorities in government that we need to put our resources on. These are the things that state government needs to focus on. I'm very excited about the opportunity to be a part of that. Without question, for me, education is one of those foundational elements. Our environment can be nothing short of a global imperative that has to weave its way into our solutions. And the best thing about Washington is we will find a way to reform our government, our tax code, and create jobs at the same time we're cleaning up our environment. The green economy is real, and I'm really excited to be a part of that. So thanks again.
I'm going to direct my first question to you, Chris. Washington State Constitution says the paramount duty of the state is to make ample provision for the education of all children. Based on the 1978 Supreme Court decision and the 2010 Superior Court ruling by Judge Ehrlich, the state is failing to fulfill this constitutional duty. What is your position on the priority of education in funding in these difficult times? And how do you respond to these legal circumstances?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. Without question, it is our state's paramount duty. The Constitution makes that clear. Our state made some conscious decisions in the 1970s to actually make it so. So more than being on paper, our state put in policies that made the state the primary funder of our K-12 system. With it was a philosophy that if you wanted some things above and beyond basic education at the local level, then we would allow local school levies to make up some of those differences. Unfortunately, what we've done in Washington is we've divested our responsibility at the state level through a long series of problems, and we've increased the obligation on local property taxpayers, so that today, to really create a comprehensive basic education program in our local schools, we're relying on between 24, 25, and sometimes up to over 30% of those resources coming from local property taxes. We've got a lot of work to do in this area. It's one of the things that really has compelled me to jump into this race, and I'm very fortunate to have a background in education, both as a student, a public school student here in Washington. I grew up here. Then ultimately as a teacher now in the college system. It is the single biggest thing we can do to help our economy long term, but we've got to get it right. We've got to put the state back in primary responsibility of education with respect to funding, and we've got to make sure we revise our tax code in a way that provides adequate resource. Having between a quarter and a third of your budget coming from property taxes for schools, I don't think is a long-term healthy solution, and I'm very excited about jumping into that.
Jason, you have a minute to respond, and to refresh your memory, the question is, what is your position on the priority of education funding given the legal rulings that I outlined at the beginning?
Well, I agree with Chris that education constitutionally as well as ethically has to be a high priority. What I question is the way we handle that. Right now, about $10,000 is going per student in our educational system, but only 59% of that is going directly to the classroom. We have to ask ourselves a question: does more money automatically equal better education? And there's reports out there that we're spending some of the most amount of money per student in the state, but yet our results are some of the bottom national results as far as college attendance and things like that. We really need to take a careful look at what makes education better and how where the money goes to funding education. So I'm not opposed to making education a top priority. It needs to be. We just need to look on how we manage that.
Thank you. This next question now, Jason, is for you. In House Bill 2261, passed in 2009, early learning was included in basic education funding, but the governor vetoed that section. Do you believe that early learning should be part of basic education funded by the state?
That's a good question. Early learning is critical. I mean, when small children are affected by education, it carries them throughout their whole adult life. I personally believe that early learning should be handled at home, and that we need to focus our attention and our resources on enabling parents to really help their children be prepared for the educational system. And I think there's ways to do that with state funding and support. That doesn't necessarily have to be through a classroom setting. It can be through counseling and things like that through other kinds of programs more efficiently.
Thank you. Chris, would you like to respond? Again, the question is, do you believe that early learning should be part of basic education funded by the state?
I do. And I think what we will find long term is that, like anything in social science, there really is more science to it than social. We've learned a lot over the last 100 years. We used to think basic education was essentially first grade to 8th grade. And we learned that as our economy evolved, we needed to fund kids through 12th grade. Well, we now have so much science in place to tell us that the way the brain works and the way the brain maps information, the very best investment we can make is essentially in 3 or 4-year-olds through targeted educational programs, primarily reading and recognition of numbers. But we've got some element of this that we can do. And honestly, we can fund this without a dramatic change in our investment if we get more strategic on what we do at the sophomore, junior, and senior level of high school, because we are funneling a whole lot of kids into a single pathway, and we need those options available to kids. As they make choices in vocational, professional, technical programs earlier in high school, that will free up resources for us to put into early learning. I absolutely think early learning is part of basic ed going forward.
The next question, we'll start with you, Chris. Do you think the state's current tax structure is adequate for the current services and allows for future developments? Explain why or why not, and how, if not, how you would change the current tax structure.
Great. No, we have a we have a 20th century tax structure in a 21st century world. So what we did philosophically in the state 100 years ago or more is we said basically we want to tax consumption. When people buy goods, we're going to generate resource. When businesses have transactions, we're going to buy or we're going to generate revenue. And then we made a powerful statement 100 years ago that said that we're going to tax property fairly high in the state, because at that time property was a real symbol of wealth. Well, everything has shifted beneath us in that time. Several things, not the least of which is property is no longer sort of the great symbol of wealth. More and more of us have home ownership. We now know that renters even pay property taxes. It's passed along to them. So an overdependence on property taxes is essentially distributing the tax burden from the very few originally to more and more folks who can least afford it. Secondly, what's happening in our tax code is we've shifted our behavior. We now consume 2/3 of our consumption in this state is services, not goods. So we have a tax base that essentially taxes us for things like bottled water and objects, when most of us are consuming services, which many of them are not taxed. The result, government is now, state and local government in Washington is now 10% of GDP, and it used to be 12% of GDP. At its peak, and it's averaged just under 11% for 40 years. I know it seems awfully hard to imagine, but state and local government is smaller today as a share of the economy than it has ever been in Washington. That's not true of the federal government. That's a whole nother conversation, but in state government we are smaller. I think that's jeopardizing some investments, not the least of which are K-12 and basic education, which we just talked about. I want a dramatic tax reform change in our state, and it involves lowering property taxes, lowering B&O taxes, putting a high income earners tax in place, and ultimately taxing corporate profit.
Jason, would you like to respond to that? Again, the question is, do you think the state's current tax structure is adequate for current services and allows for future developments?
Well, I tend to agree with Chris that we need some serious changes, and that affecting the B&O taxes to a lower point. I would like to see it over a long period of time eliminated. And of course, I also agree that property taxes need to come down. Where the problem that I have comes in is taxing industry, taxing the economy. A tax on higher income earners will eventually come to taxing all, as it's been evidenced in other states. And so to believe that a tax on higher income earners is the way it will be, it's not the way it will end up being. And there's even been some discussion now from some judges, even Democrat judges, that 1098 state income tax could be unconstitutional. So.
Thank you. Jason, this next question is for you. The governor has said the state budget for 2011 through 2013 will need to be cut by $3 million. What types of cuts to the state budget would you vote for?
On Lacey Council last year, we had the challenge to cut our budget to $2 million. And what we did is we took that budget, which was quite extensive, and we went through line by line by line by line, and we decided what could be cut and prioritized. We need to take the same approach to that and look at it very carefully, piece by piece, on where we can cut to do this. In Lacey, we didn't cut any jobs, and we didn't cut any services. And that included the lifeguards that we thought about maybe cutting, but we realized that it was too important, and the next year they saved 10 lives. So it's going to take a careful, thorough line-by-line search to find those cuts, but we can do that.
Thank you. Chris, again, the question is, what types of cuts to the state budget would you vote for in order to achieve the necessary state savings, $3 million?
Well, we've already cut something in the vicinity, I believe, of $6 billion from the state budget. As I said, it's shrinking as a share of GDP. We now have employees experiencing layoffs, furloughs, pay reductions, higher health care costs. We have fewer services. The number is actually $3 billion that has to be cut.
Yes, I misspoke.
Following the forecast next week and following governor action and potentially with some of these initiatives on the ballot, this number could be $4 billion by next biennium. We clearly need to find cuts, and to specifically answer your question, we need to figure out ways to take what we call back-end systems and make them more efficient. Each agency does not need its own technology platform or infrastructure. There's tremendous opportunity to save money by consolidation of information technology and basic back-end systems. There is a limit to this, however. And oversimplifying this as a need to cut more services is simply wrong. We have obligations to our citizens, not the least of which our education system. And when we have a tax code that rewards excessively wealthy folks at the expense of middle class, we can do better than that, and we can fund critical programs. This will not be an all-cuts budget for me.
Thank you. The next question goes to you. What should the state do to promote green energy and to reduce carbon emissions in Washington?
Oh, there's a lot of things we can do. First and foremost, we need to make sure that there are incentives for businesses who engage in these practices. So we already have some of that happening in our public utilities, where there are incentives or reward programs in place for those who use renewable clean energy technologies. Second, and probably just as important, if not more, the state has to think about itself as an incubator for these businesses. So we need a tax code that rewards them on a large scale, and we need to infuse in our education programs sustainability practices. Now, that's not just some educational talk there. We have curriculum being developed in this state right now at the K-12 level and the college level, where students are learning what sustainability really means. They're learning to design, for example, in engineering programs, ways to basically recycle water, recycle energy. Every aspect of our lives can be enhanced, and we can lower costs of services and particularly to businesses. But it's not just buying some single program like, new windows or new lighting. It's infusing the culture of sustainability in everything we do, and it starts in our education programs. Another really key thing we can all do is this November, on November 2nd. You have Referendum 52 before us as voters. I strongly encourage people to vote yes for this. It creates a $505 million package to energy retrofit our facilities. It takes old, dilapidated, unfortunately, education buildings, higher education buildings, and other state buildings, and it retrofits them. It puts in efficient lighting, efficient heating and cooling systems, window replacement. It creates jobs. At the same time, we're reducing energy consumption and lowering operating costs for our public sector. This is a win all the way around, and these are the kinds of innovative strategies I think that we can look forward to in the future, and I'm quite excited about them. So.
Thank you. Jason, now to you. What should the state do to promote green energy and reduce carbon emissions in Washington?
Just recently on Lacey City Council, we approved an infrastructure plan and a standardization plan for electric cars for the private sector to implement when the investors come to do that. And it didn't cost a dime. I believe that the government's role is to standardize, prepare, and code for these new technologies to come in so that the private sector can invest and really make it happen, and they will. And so creating the way and making it easy for investment to come in and be green is the way to go. Also, my work on solid waste advisory spends a lot of time educating the public about opportunities to become green.
Thank you. The next question goes to you. Jason, have you any suggestions for lowering the costs of elections, both in the time and money and any other aspects of the system you think are negative?
Are you referring to cost to government or cost to candidates?
Both, actually.
Okay. Well, certainly information needs to be available. and citizenry needs to participate. And with the internet, there are so many ways to do that. And the state has an informational voters pamphlet on the internet. And the county has implemented a voter pamphlet, which I believe serves everybody, but they do that in-house and save money that way. So as far as reducing costs, we need to continue to look at ways of doing that without hurting the opportunity for fair and complete elections. And as far as to the candidates go, you know, it's a free country, and candidates have a right to raise money and spend it as they should to promote their ideals. So.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to respond? Again, the question is, what are your suggestions for lowering the costs of elections, both in the amount of time and money, and maybe some of the other negative aspects that we
I'll go quickly because there's two big elements to this. With respect to elections by candidates, we can do a lot of things. Number one, we can shorten the time frame of these campaigns. I'd like to see them start later. I would like to see us have a more compressed time. We have lots of information media channels now to utilize. We should do that, but we shouldn't be littering yard signs up for 8 or 9 months in our communities. We can do better than that, and we should. I would personally support a publicly funded option in election campaigns to make it more viable for lots of folks who don't have access to a lot of resources. But then I'm going to really shift gears on you and tell you that the other dramatic thing we can do is reform our initiative process. In the state of Washington, we're going to spend over $30 million this year alone on 6 or 7 initiatives. That's, I think, going to be more than twice as much as all of the candidates running for statewide office this year. We have an initiative process that's abused by out-of-state folks who are dumping millions and millions of dollars to shape policy in our state. The greatest thing we can do is affect the initiative process. It's not what it was intended to be.
All right, this is my last question, and it goes to you, Chris, first. Assuming you're elected to office and you choose to run again, would you subscribe to public financing of your campaign if such a system is adopted?
Yes. Yes. Again, as we just said, campaigns are very expensive. We need reform. We can do little things in terms of timing and whatnot, but we can also actually go to a public option. I know the courts have already ruled. They said that individuals, you can't limit their ability to promote themselves. The courts have given us some barriers here. But we just have to have different ways of doing these things. I'm proud of our state. We already have tremendous laws in place that limit how much organizations, whether they're labor or business or individuals, can give to campaigns. We're ahead of a lot of states in this regard, but there's a lot more we can do. There's a lot more we can do. But at the same time, you know, let's not choose any option that makes it more difficult for voters to have information. Let's challenge them to be engaged. Let's embrace a democracy that still relies on electing people to make difficult decisions. Let's embrace a system that still has elections. My biggest concern is that we're moving, you know, sort of to vote by populism every year or two. And whatever is really popular at that time, whatever the national sentiment is, we get an initiative for that and we vote for it. So in the same year, we're slashing taxes with an initiative and we're raising spending with an initiative over here. We have a lot of work to do in this democracy to stay relevant and current on issues, but election reform would go a long ways in helping us do that if we could do it right.
Thank you. Again, Jason, to you, the question is, if you're elected and choose to run again, would you subscribe to public financing of your campaign if a system for that is adopted?
I fundamentally believe that a government-sponsored campaign is a bad idea. We're a free country, and we need to remain that way and not be sponsored by taxpayer money for a particular candidate. And so I would like to keep it free. One example of that is right now several unions have memberships of people that don't want to be members but still have to pay dues that go towards campaigns that they don't want to support. And I think that's the wrong direction, and we need to go the other way and not have government-sponsored campaigns.
Well, gentlemen, it's time for your closing statements. And Chris Reykdal, we'll start with you.
Great. Again, thanks to Clydia and the League. This is a great opportunity. This is what elections are about, the opportunity for us to communicate on critical issues and have folks learn about that. I'll start by just saying thanks to the voters for a tremendous primary campaign. We had really high turnout in our state for historically for other elections, and I'm proud of that. I love that we live in Washington where we're very engaged. I've not made any secrets about my passion for education and tax reform in Washington. I just don't think we get the outcomes that we want long term unless we're really committed to difficult decisions, and status quo will not work anymore. It won't work in the way we tax, it won't work in the way that we fund programs, it won't work in the way we educate our kids and protect our environment. These are truly unprecedented times brought to us by issues, in many cases, we didn't control. But they're in our lap, we have responsibility for them, and I just really look forward, if I have the opportunity to serve this district, to represent it with passion and energy, to take experiences that I have, both public and private sector, background in education, background in tax reform, and apply those skills in a way that gets us to a brighter tomorrow. You indicated earlier it won't be easy. Another $3 or $4 billion deficit coming our way. I can only assure the folks in the 22nd District that I will never vote for an all-cuts budget, given where we are today. We need remarkably different answers to very new and difficult questions, and I am prepared to make those tough choices. So again, thank you. Thanks to Jason for being here, and I look forward to being out there. ChrisReykdal.com if folks want a lot more information about where I'm at on issues.
Jason Hearn, now we'd like to hear your closing statement.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to run for this race. The state of Washington has some serious troubles, and I look forward to the opportunity to bring the soundness and the good news in Lacey to the district and to this area. We're looking for, towards the elections, watching the news, we're seeing that the state of Washington is headed towards some changes in our legislature to bring back some of the conservative values to our government that we desperately need. And I certainly want to be a part of that solution and serve the 22nd District. Want to help the state employees get their retirements fully funded again, and bring stability to the district so that we don't have to continue to rely on the federal government and short-term solutions. We need to settle down and develop long-term solutions so that we can have stability, we can have rainy day funds, and we can have calm, cool, and collected government operations so that our state has the opportunity to prosper and build economic development in ways that we haven't seen in a long, long time. So I look forward to the opportunity and encourage you to contact me at jasonhearn.com and engage so that we can fully exercise all the ideas in this election and really have some success here for Thurston, for the 22nd District, which is Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of this forum for the Legislative District 22 candidates. I want to thank the candidates, and I want to thank TCTV and the League for making this possible.